just how massive this infrastructure is in our country. We have roughly 2.5.
Welcome to our breakout room. We're very lucky to have Dr. Brita Lundberg, CEO and founder of Lundberg Health Associates, LLC, a patient advocacy group. She's chair of the board at Greater Boston Physicians for Social Responsibility, an organization that has authored 3 reports available on their website on the serious public health risks of the natural gas compressor station in Weymouth, Mass. She's also co-author of The False Promise of Natural Gas, published in the New England Journal of Medicine in January 2020. Dr. Lundberg is a member of the Massachusetts Medical Society Occupational and Environmental Health Committee and a member of Climate Code Blue, a physician advocacy group on climate change, and the COVID-19 Action Coalition. Her primary area of interest is the effects of health on human health of fossil fuels and climate change. And with that, here is Dr. Lundberg.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you so much to Sustainable Middlesex for inviting me to speak with you today. And thank you so much to all of you for taking the time this morning to listen about what I happen to think is a very important topic. So often talks about climate change mention fossil fuels only in passing, sometimes not at all. I've attended many talks on climate change. And when they are discussed, natural gas is frequently not even mentioned. There will be a photo of a smokestack belching black plumes of smoke like this. End of story. There we go. But this is where my talk begins, an innocuous looking gas tank, and you see the caption, you see the methane leak billowing from this tank. Well, I think a lot of the problems around natural gas stem from the fact that it is largely an unseen source of pollution. But using the infrared camera used in this New York Times article, you can clearly see that this tells a different story. It shows a huge amount of methane leaking out of this tank. And I urge you to watch the videos of this online. They're very compelling, also from many pipelines, abandoned natural gas wells across the country. So I hope by the end of this presentation to share some data with you and give you an idea of why natural gas is not green or clean, to talk about the health risks we're seeing all across the process chain, from the drill rig to the compressor station to our kitchens, and how this fuel is a huge driver of climate change and what we have to do to kick the habit. So what is natural gas? This is not your grandfather's natural gas excavated from shallow depressions in the Earth's surface. What we're talking about here is methane, depicted by the classic chemical formula CH4, one of the simplest carbon compounds, which new means have given us the opportunity to extract via so-called unconventional methods from black shale, which often itself contains radioactive nuclides like radon and uranium. And millions of gallons of water are injected up to 10,000 feet underground with a slurry of sand and chemicals. This causes the rock layer to crack, and it releases that gas and oil, and along with it, the chemicals that were used to extract it, and then whatever was in the Earth's crust to begin with, as we'll see. So there are major problems with natural gas, and a growing body of evidence documents that probably the major problem is the leakage of methane all along the process chain. So EPA estimates initially put that about 1.5% leaking at the drill rig, flaring at the drill rig, leaking during the processing part of distribution, the transportation through compressor stations, and then also in your homes. But more recent data has put that up to 3.7%, according to a recent report, satellite report from the European Space Agency, where parts of our process chain, they have noted leaks of up to 300 tons per hour. It's hard to get your mind around such large amounts. But the point is that that's enough to erase the greenhouse gas benefits of quitting coal for gas in the near term. The reason is that methane gas is a very potent greenhouse gas, up to 85 times more potent than carbon at warming the climate over a 20-year time range. So why do we care? Well, because methane is increasing much faster in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide, an astounding 250% since the pre-industrial age, and a very steep increase in the last 10 years, with a clear association from 60 to 90%, according to the report you read, associated with oil and gas development. This slide shows that increase visually, and it shows where most of this increase is coming from. Oil and gas development. In this slide, we see the back-end oil and gas fields that stretch across Montana, North Dakota, Montana, North Dakota, and Canada. And it flares off so much natural gas that it lights up brighter than Minneapolis from outer space, which is pretty stunning. So methane is a direct and indirect driver of climate disruption. I've included the classic CDC climate wheel here. Obviously, this damages health and well-being in all of these documented ways through extreme weather events, heat-related illness, and so on. But in addition, I would argue natural gas, because it pollutes the very resources, adequate clean water, clean air, clean soil, that are increasingly compromised and strained due to climate disruption, it is both creating a problem and exacerbating it at the same time. I think few people realize just how massive this infrastructure is in our country. We have roughly 2.5 million miles, more than any other country in the world. And much of this pipeline infrastructure and drilling is located in the breadbasket of the United States, where the greatest intensive crops, livestock are, the shallowest and most easily contaminated water systems. Sorry. I did that. Tell the truth, I'm not sure how to go back. So I'll just say that these problems occur on the local level, the regional level, the global level. I mentioned in the last slide that there is the New England Journal article that summarizes all of these. Today, I will focus just on air pollution and the safety hazards that go along with natural gas infrastructure. There we go. Wow, it's so sensitive. So there are a lot of safety issues around natural gas, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that this is a massive infrastructure at high pressure. This is a picture of fossil fuel infrastructure being put in your backyard in Otis State Forest in Western Mass. This pipeline, they can range up to 1,500 PSI, and they are up to 48 inches in diameter. Just to put this in perspective, your car tires run at 33 PSI. The pipelines that exploded in the Merrimack Valley in 2018, those are distribution pipelines, and those were pressurized at 0.5 PSI. So you can imagine when this pipeline explodes, it's going to be quite something. But I also would like to point out that just in the process of installing this pipeline, you have climate effects. You have drying of the understory of the tree canopy just adjacent to this pipeline. That will increase the risk of drought. It will increase the risk of wildfires, which tracks with natural gas infrastructure. And it also weakens the ability of that tree canopy to sequester carbon. Interestingly, when leaks happen, it changes the soil composition and reverses the gradient of carbon dioxide to oxygen, so that you have a majority of carbon dioxide, very little oxygen. And as a result, you see a lot of dying of the vegetation around the pipes where the leakage happens. In fact, in the old days, that's how folks who worked on natural gas pipelines knew that there was a gas leak, because all the trees in that area, for instance, would be dead. So it might be hard to imagine gas leaking from that nice new shiny pipeline that I just pictured in Otis Forest, but it's not hard at all to imagine this rusted out pipeline leaking in Rehoboth, Mass. This is about an hour south of here. And it's important to point out that about 50% of the pipeline in our country is over 50 years old. This is a safety issue and important to point out, because here in Boston, if you live in Boston, you live within 1 mile of a methane leak. And when methane leaks, it has a tendency to explode. And so you see in the background there, the Merrimack Valley pipeline explosions. Now, those interestingly happened not due to leaks, which are a common source of explosion. They happened due to the fact that the pipelines were overpressurized 12 times what they were meant to be pressurized at. But I point them out because a lot of times people will say, oh, we'll just put in a new pipeline and that will solve the problem of these leaks. So it's very interesting. I point you to this inset chart here, and which points out an alarming trend. When you analyze by year of installation, our transmission line incident rates have seen a 5-fold increase by date of installation from the 2000s to past the 2010s. In fact, more recently installed pipeline has a higher rate of failure than the very oldest pipeline that was installed pre-1940s. Even more concerning than this is that industry does not have a good explanation for this.
Sarah's coming at noon.
I point out this slide just to make the point that the actual burn radius in this Salem Township fire in 2016 was actually 2 times the I don't know why. Okay.
You're good.
I'm good. Good.
Yeah.
The point of this slide was really to suggest that the burn radius, when these pipelines do explode, the so-called potential impact radius is not a very good indicator of what actually will happen when one of these pipelines explodes. In the case of the Salem Township fire, the actual burn radius was almost 2 times the predicted potential impact radius. So the many health effects of natural gas many of them are due to its fellow travelers, the bad actors that go along with it. These include the criteria: air pollutants, ozone and particulate matter, the fluids used to extract it, the BTEX chemicals, and from the Earth's crust, lead, radioactive radon, uranium, and mercury. Today, I will just focus on particulate matter and benzene. So the natural gas industry is responsible for producing hundreds of thousands of tons of air pollution every year because of these methane leaks, because of that gas flaring that you saw, and estimated 13,000 tons of particulate matter in 2012 alone. So what is particulate matter? PM2.5, the most harmful form, 2.5 is for 2.5 microns, its size, is really just a mixture of so-called black carbon, soot, hydrocarbons, nitrogen oxides, and metals. The main take-home message to take away from this is that 30 of these particles will fit into the diameter of a shaft of hair. They are tiny, and that means that when you inhale them, they penetrate deep, deep into the lungs into the bronchioles where they aggravate asthma. They can then cross into the bloodstream where they increase the hypercoagulability, the ability to clot of the blood, leading to heart attacks and stroke. They worsen pneumonia, and they worsen pneumonia outcomes. This has especially been seen during the COVID pandemic. Children are especially vulnerable. And the important thing to note is that risk exists at all levels. There is no safe threshold. This is important because PM2.5 is increasing in this country. This is from a National Bureau of Economic Research working paper out of Cambridge. Oversight is decreasing. In the last 4 years, there was a 50% decrease in prosecutions under the Clean Air Act. And the increase in PM2.5, according to this paper, which showed it very nicely, is associated with oil and gas development. So the US natural gas industry is also one of the highest VOC emitters in the country. Benzene, the so-called BTEX chemicals, benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, dilene, xylene, affect the nervous system. They can cause cancer, they can cause birth defects, they're endocrine disruptors, and very much like particulate matter, there is no safe level. There are elevated levels seen at the drill rig and compressor stations, in pipelines. And this is concerning because very often this infrastructure is right up against, in this case in Pennsylvania, an elementary school, 630 feet from this elementary school. So what are the health consequences of that exposure? More babies being born prematurely, more babies with heart defects, more kids with asthma, more children diagnosed with leukemia. Many peer-reviewed studies document these health effects, which are best defined at the drill rig because there's very little else there. The epidemiology on compressor stations is a little more challenging because they are generally located in areas where there's already a lot of very heavy industry. I show here a picture of the Weymouth compressor station. This has already been installed. It will emit benzene and other VOCs 24/7, all known to cause cancer. There are 3,100 children within 1 mile, so there will be an increased asthma risk to them. But what I'd really like to draw your attention to, and I recommend our GBPSR public safety report on this, is that it is 700 feet to the closest home. So that's a concern because when you look at Spectra, the company who's built this pipeline's own prediction of their potential impact radius, which is also known as the death zone, it's 726 feet. That means that that home is included in that radius. It is also, since we're talking about climate, located entirely in a hurricane flood zone. But I think the most breathtaking part of the reports that we have put out is from this report and the maps at the end of that report, which I would steer you toward just to take a look at because they're so disturbing. So this is a very vulnerable population. There are 2 environmental justice populations within 1.5 miles of Weymouth. And these maps show, this is just one of those maps, but there are maps for all of these health conditions. And they show that this area is top in the state for oral cancer, lung cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma, laryngeal cancer, leukemia, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, asthma hospitalizations, COPD, ER visits, heart attack rates, non-white population, ages over 65 and under 5, so extremely challenging to evacuate, population density, and lowest median quartile income. That's pretty much the definition of structural racism, which I think our state should be moving away from and not toward. Sorry, So what about in our homes? Well, it turns out that the same compounds found at the compressor station and drill rig are in our homes also. This is just from the lab bench showing that this fellow was interested and just checked and saw that he found all those BTEX chemicals that I mentioned from the compressor station and drill rig. But there have also been assessments showing that they are actually present in our houses here in Massachusetts also. And these do have health effects. A very robust set of studies collected over the last 30 years show a association with pediatric asthma in children under 6 who live in homes where gas stoves are used for cooking. They have an increased risk of asthma and reduced lung function, but importantly, ventilating that stove improves that risk. In sum, I would say that natural gas is really the secondhand smoke of our time. Very much like secondhand smoke, children are most vulnerable, and like secondhand smoke, the health impacts of natural gas are preventable. There is nothing about climate change, there is nothing about these health impacts that can't be ameliorated. So I'll just name a couple opportunities to improve health. One was mentioned this morning in the bill, proposed bill HD 1296, in terms of eliminating natural gas hookups for new construction. Brookline passed such an ordinance. They've also been passed across the country in Berkeley and New York City to create financial penalties for gas leaks. What a concept. In Canada and in France, where these have been instituted, leaks dropped by 40 to 60%. Eliminating all new gas infrastructure, period. Do we need these new compressor stations, new gas pipelines when we already have more than any country in the world? In fact, our natural gas infrastructure looks like other people's public transportation infrastructure in other countries. And I would argue that we should work on moving people and not moving carbon molecules. Rapidly transitioning to solar, wind, and geothermal, I don't think we have a choice. Other ways of taking action: legislation to protect communities, not locating compressor stations within 700 feet of the nearest home, within a mile of 3,100 children. That would be one way to protect communities. To eliminate government subsidies to the oil and gas industry, those have also already been mentioned this morning. Require the oil and gas industry to assume the costs of remediation and cleaning up those leaks and spills. Something that you can do today if you cook with gas, like I do, is to remember to run your kitchen fan if you use gas. And one of the important messages we got from several of our readers of the New England Journal article was that he said, you don't point out that natural gas is a feedstock industry to the plastic industry, to the pesticide industry, and importantly, to road salt, to brine. A lot of that is fracking fluids that are repurposed for that purpose. The great news is that cutting air pollution can prevent deaths within weeks, as we saw at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. Asthma, heart attacks fall rapidly, babies are born healthier, fewer low birth weight babies, premature. And the health, I point you to this excellent article, The Health Benefits of Air Pollution Reduction. So in sum, the extraction, distribution, and burning of natural gas is harming health. The risks occur to the air, water, and soil pollution all along the process chain. And the risk to human health created by the climate impact of this infrastructure may be the greatest of these health concerns. I'm happy to take any questions. And just for fun, I thought I'd throw in that New Yorker cartoon. There never will be a gas pipeline running across a golf course. I haven't seen it. You can correct me. And thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Can we get copies of your slides? Will you put them?
Yes, I will share them absolutely after the talk.
All right, great. Thank you.
we've had a couple of questions in the chat, and then we can open it up. One was, how much particulate matter is released into a home when with gas cooking?
I don't have an exact number for that, and I think that it depends on what you're cooking. I just know that it is greater, that amount is greater than, say, if you use other sources of cooking. But it's not the particulate matter so much as the nitrogen dioxides. That is what correlates linearly in a dose response kind of way with the development of asthma in children. So it wasn't the particulate matter, it was the nitrogen oxides.
And a follow-up to that, can gas cooking contribute to allergies?
I would have to say, I would have to look that up and get back to you on that. I don't know.
No worries. You've given us such great information. Another person said that they'd heard that New York City went from coal to natural gas infrastructure in less than 5 years in the 1950s. Do you know if this is true? And can we do the same thing, changing to a green infrastructure? That was Karen from Acton.
I did not know that, and I think we absolutely can go from a natural gas to an electric-based infrastructure. I think that it just takes motivation.
And there's a whole breakout room on that topic in this.
Exactly, yes. Thank you, Mark.
So in Acton, we're working on a home rule petition that would ban new natural gas hookups in new construction.
Mm-hmm.
But as a part of that, I mean, one of the big arguments that people raise is that I want natural gas for my stovetop cooking. And so here in Mothers Out Front, we're in Acton, we're going to do a campaign on induction cooking. And I think there are a lot of good health arguments for it.
Yes.
But I also saw in one fact sheet that there are some health issues with induction cooking. Are you aware of those? And could you comment on that? Like people with pacemakers or certain kinds of pacemakers need to be careful.
Yes, you know, Arlington did an excellent presentation on cooking with gas versus induction stoves. And that concern did get raised there. I did learn myself, since this isn't my area, but I did hear in the course of that presentation that pacemakers are of concern, and that you would not use an induction stove if you had a pacemaker, in fact. So I think it's all, you know, it's sort of like the scales of justice. You have to come out for what is most harmful. And to me, my main concern personally around cooking with natural gas is what else is in that gas. You know, I didn't focus at all, mainly because there just isn't very much data about the radionuclides, the uranium, the radium, the radon. All of this stuff is when you unconventionally extract this gas, all of that stuff bubbles up to the surface too. We know it's present at the drill rig. We know it's present at the compressor station. Have we ever checked in our homes? Is there, you know, I can't find any data on that. It's one of the things I would like. There's so many things we need to know more about. So would I rather have induction cooking and its potential issues around electromagnetic radiation? I think that's one thing that people have brought up. Or would I like to have benzene, the nitrogen oxides that actually in my own family, I can say may have been involved in my own children developing asthma, and I had no at a young age. And I just never even thought about the risks of cooking with gas and its correlation with their asthma. And except that when I started reading those studies and I started ventilating my gas stove and running the fan, my son stopped using his inhaler.
Mhm.
So I think that those health effects are potent. We need to know more about them. There are a lot of obstacles to learning more about them. And so yes, every time you change from one technology to another, of course, you might learn new things as you explore them.
I mean, I'm totally with you in terms of switching from natural gas. It's just that we want to be able to be informed and be able to argue the opposition
Yes.
points.
Yes.
If I
Andy
could follow
Krasner
up.
has been very involved in that. Excuse me?
If I could follow up on your comment about what other chemicals are in the natural gas, the thing that I was wondering about is if you'd looked at those fracking chemicals, this stuff that people put in the water in order to accelerate the fracking, and if that
Yes.
makes it into our gas.
Well, it does. Those are the BTEX chemicals, right? So benzene, ethylbenzene, xylene, toluene. That's the chemical, which is essentially antifreeze. That's part there, and many other proprietary chemicals are injected in there, and they bubble back up to the surface. And yes, we do find those at our stovetop. Yikes, you know? Of course, in very, very small amounts. But, and again, it's very difficult to draw a straight line. It's very pure, the science of that's all there is. You know, there's the drill rig and then there's nothing else for hundreds of miles around. And so you can say with a fair amount of certainty, yes, those episodes of acute lymphocytic leukemia and all the asthma that you see there, that's going to be due to the drill rig, and you can see a temporal relationship. But in our homes, in environmental, you know, it's at the compressor station, which is in the middle many times of environmental justice communities that already have heavy industry. It's really difficult to draw a direct line. And so, yeah.
I see a hand up. Samuel Gifford from Natick.
Hi, thanks. I am a volunteer in the town of Natick, working with in a community action where we're trying to promote clean heat, solar and heat pump technologies. We have about a 9-month program. We just put out an RFP to installers. And the low-hanging fruit will be homes with solar PV and oil heat, because they can probably save money right away with a heat pump installation.
Yeah.
But with our natural gas customers, which is more than 2/3 of the residents in these communities, what is our sales pitch as coaches or as neighbors to try to get people educated about heat pumps and to get some movement on getting people to start installations?
Right. So as someone who has just installed a heat pump, I can speak to this. And I did move from natural gas to a heat pump. I think the main driver for my decision was definitely climate, right? But I think as we do this, it's kind of like the question about induction stoves and, you know, we have to make sure that as we do that, we have to clean the grid that is providing the electricity. Our power plants have to be powered by renewables. Wood burning fuel is not one of those. Trash is not one of those. I was really dismayed, I guess is the word, to see what a significant portion of the mix, of the energy mix that constitutes here in Massachusetts. And so, number one, we have to get our energy grid cleaner as people start to make that transition. And the other advice I would give to natural gas customers who are making that change is make sure you have someone who is really skilled in installing one of those heat pumps. In fact, I guess this goes for all customers. when you put one in, because if they don't know how to set it up right, your energy bills may just skyrocket. And I guess the litmus test, so how do you know who's going to know how to set it up right? I would interview your HVAC provider before you go to that. And I would ask them, do you think that this is that this is good for the environment? Do you think that this is going to save energy and be better for the environment overall? And if they say no, absolutely not, it won't, don't go with that provider, because they are not going to be the ones who will know how to set it up in the most energy effective way. They might be just the ones who come and pop it in and then kind of leave the scene. Having just been through that, I speak from personal experience there. So make sure that you do due diligence when you hire your HVAC provider. And in your community, if you recommend people, I would be happy to suggest a few names.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to just jump in to note that we are past the planned ending time. I don't know how much time Dr. Lundberg has to spend this with us today. We can go a little over if people would like, but first I'd like to just check in with our speaker.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm happy to take one or two more questions if there are any. I'm just so pleased that you were here with me today.
There in the chat has been more conversation about fans and whether it actually moves it away but remains in the atmosphere of the home.
So that is a critically important question. So your fan cannot be the sort that just recirculates the air. There are those ones where you turn it on, it has to be a fan that vents to the outside. If your fan doesn't vent to the outside, it is just recirculating those VOCs within your home and the nitrogen oxides, and that is not healthy. You definitely want it to be an externally venting fan. And in fact, natural gas stoves used to externally vent, like the oven part of the stove vented to the outside. Around 2000, when I first installed our natural gas stove in our home, they stopped using this external vents, and it has, I believe, harmed the health of those who've used those stoves.
Let's see. There is a question about whether you're available as a speaker. I believe your contact information is at the beginning of your slideshow. Well, I can't remember.
So you can find, I am absolutely available as a speaker. We are happy to address community groups. We at Greater Boston PSR have a whole speakers bureau. You can check out our website, and each of us is listed individually. If there's a certain topic that you really want to focus in on, you can check us all out there and then reach out to our executive director, Anna Baker. The email is on the website, and request a speaker. Absolutely.
Great. I suspect that we should not take up more of your day, but people are welcome to go back into the main room where there'll be ongoing discussions. And but thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. I learned a lot, as I'm sure everyone else did. So thank you, Dr. Lundberg.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this fantastic group. Thank you for all being here.
Thanks, everybody.